The decrepit house at the end of Sycamore Street had been abandoned for years. Its peeling paint and unkempt yard were a stark contrast to the well-maintained homes around it. The residents had mostly grown accustomed to ignoring it. That changed one crisp autumn morning when a moving truck arrived, parking in front of the dilapidated house. Curious neighbors peeked from their windows as a tall, thin man with a stern expression stepped out. He directed the movers with short, sharp instructions. His presence was disconcerting, his eyes cold and distant. Emily Parker, a single mother in her mid-30s living across the street, was the first to approach him. She prided herself on being welcoming to newcomers. With her 10-year-old daughter, Lily, beside her, she crossed the street with a plate of freshly baked cookies. "Hello," she greeted warmly. "I'm Emily Parker and this is my daughter, Lily. We live right over there." The man turned slowly, his gaze narrowing. "William Barrett," he responded, his voice deep and uninviting. He did not smile. "We wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood," Emily continued, offering the cookies. "I thought you might like some after a long day of moving." William stared at the plate before taking it, his fingers brushing against Emily's. His touch was icy. "Thank you," he said without warmth. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask," Emily said, trying to maintain a friendly demeanor under his unsettling gaze. William nodded, his eyes lingering on Lily for an uncomfortably long time. "I'll keep that in mind," he said before turning back to the movers. As Emily and Lily returned home, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about their new neighbor. She glanced at Lily, who frowned. "Mom, I don't like him," Lily said bluntly. Emily sighed. "I know, sweetie. But let's give him a chance, okay? Maybe he's just having a rough day." Lily didn't look convinced but nodded. As they reached their front door, Emily looked back once more. William Barrett was watching them, his expression unreadable. Soon after, strange events began to occur. At first, there were minor items disappearing from porches, torn mail, odd noises at night. The neighbors whispered among themselves, their suspicions inevitably directed at the newcomer. Emily tried to dismiss it, reminding herself and others that these incidents could be coincidental, but even she couldn't ignore the change in the atmosphere on Sycamore Street since William's arrival. One evening, as Emily was preparing dinner, Lily rushed into the kitchen, her face pale. "Mom, there's something outside my window." Emily followed her to her room, her heart pounding. She peered into the darkening night but saw nothing unusual. "There's nothing there, Lily." "Maybe it was just a shadow." Lily shook her head. "No, Mom. I saw a face. It was staring at me." Emily's unease grew, but she tried to reassure her daughter. "I'll call the police and report it. Maybe they can send someone to patrol the neighborhood." The police came, but found no evidence of anyone lurking around. They suggested it was likely a trick of the light or a neighborhood prank. But Emily knew her daughter and she knew Lily wasn't making things up. As days passed, the feeling of being watched became more intense. Emily noticed William's house was always dark, the curtains tightly shut. She couldn't recall seeing any lights on, even at night. Yet there was always a sense of movement, of someone or something lurking just out of sight. One rainy afternoon, Emily's curiosity got the better of her. She had taken a rare day off work and decided to bake more cookies, hoping to use them as an excuse to check on William. She wasn't sure why she felt compelled to do this, but his isolated existence troubled her. She knocked on his door, the plate of cookies balanced on one hand. There was no answer. She knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. She tried the doorknob and was surprised to find it unlocked. "Mr. Barrett, William, she called out as she stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and something metallic. The house was eerily silent, the only sound her own breathing. She walked through the dimly lit hallway, her footsteps muffled by the threadbare carpet. As she neared the kitchen, she noticed a door slightly ajar leading down to the basement. A strange sense of dread washed over her, but she couldn't turn back now. She pushed the door open and descended the creaking stairs. The basement was dark, but she could make out the faint outline of shelves lining the walls, cluttered with various objects. As her eyes adjusted to the gloom, she saw something that made her blood run cold. In the corner, a large wooden crate was slightly open, revealing a glimpse of what looked like old, tattered clothing and bones. A noise from upstairs snapped her out of her horrified trance. She spun around, her heart racing. William was standing at the top of the stairs, his expression a mix of anger and fear. "What are you doing in my house?" he demanded, his voice dangerously low. Emily swallowed hard, her mind racing. I brought you some cookies." "The door was open and I thought you thought wrong," William interrupted, descending the stairs slowly. "Get out. Now." Emily didn't need to be told twice. She hurried up the stairs and out of the house, not stopping until she was safely back in her own home. She locked the door behind her, hands trembling. That night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen in the basement. She knew she had to do something, but she didn't know who to turn to. The police had already dismissed her concerns once. Would they believe her now? The next morning, Emily decided to take matters into her own hands. She spent the day researching William Barrett, digging through public records and online databases. What she found was both alarming and confusing. William Barrett had no digital footprint, no social media profiles, no employment records, no history at all. It was as if he had appeared out of nowhere. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily reached out to her neighbor, Mrs. Dawson, who had lived on Sycamore Street the longest. The elderly woman was known for her keen memory and extensive knowledge of the neighborhood's history. "Mrs. Dawson, do you remember anything about the house at the end of the street?" Emily asked during a visit to her cozy, cluttered living room. Mrs. Dawson's eyes widened. "Oh dear, that house has a dark past. It belonged to the Barrett family. They were very reclusive, always keeping to themselves. Then one day, they just vanished. No one knows what happened to them." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "When did this happen?" "It must have been over 20 years ago, Mrs. Dawson replied, her voice tinged with sorrow. "People say the house is cursed. Strange things have happened there ever since." Emily thanked Mrs. Dawson and returned home, her mind racing. If William Barrett was connected to the Barrett family, it could explain the eerie atmosphere and the sense of unease that permeated the house. But it also raised more questions than it answered. As night fell, Emily felt a growing sense of urgency. She couldn't ignore the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. She decided to confront William again, this time armed with the knowledge she had gathered. Emily waited until she saw William leave his house before making her move. She crossed the street and slipped inside his home, heading straight for the basement. She had to find more evidence, something concrete she could take to the authorities. The basement was as dark and foreboding as she remembered. She approached the crate, her heart pounding. She hesitated for a moment before prying it open wider, revealing a pile of old, dusty clothes and human bones. Her stomach churned at the sight. Suddenly, she heard the front door slam shut. Footsteps echoed through the house, growing louder as they approached the basement. Emily's breath caught in her throat. There was no time to hide. William appeared at the top of the stairs, his face twisted with rage. "You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you?" Emily backed away, her mind racing for a way out. "William, I know who you are. I know about the Barrett family." William's expression shifted from anger to something darker. "You think you know, but you have no idea. They were my family, and I did what I had to do to protect them." Emily's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" William took a deep breath, his anger momentarily giving way to sorrow. "They were my family, my parents and siblings. We were isolated for a reason. There was something unnatural about us." Emily's fear mingled with curiosity. "What happened to them?" William's eyes grew distant. "One night something went wrong. My younger brother Timothy couldn't control his abilities. There was an accident. They all died, and I was left alone to clean up the mess." Emily's mind raced. "But the bones in the basement are theirs," William interrupted. "I couldn't bring myself to bury them. I kept them close, trying to find a way to."